Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no copay. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hey everyone, it's May. Gosh, can you believe it? Summer's coming up. We have a lot of fun stuff planned, a lot of traveling and all those kind of things. So hopefully you stock up on Simply Snacking. They're the people who made these podcasts possible. They have paid the bills a little bit and helped to do the production and all that kind of stuff. So please support them. Get their healthy chicken and beef products. You can put them in your carry-on bag. You can stick them in the little seat compartment in front of you on the airplane, which is what I do when I travel. And then you don't have to have the chips and crackers and all the other stuff that they're going to pass out to you. So, please support them. They believed in me when this podcast started, and I am very appreciative to all the listeners, and hopefully you're getting something of value. We're talking about relationship. We're talking about sleep. We're talking about all the other things that matter, not just what we're eating, but if you're going to be eating something, make it Simply Snacking. So thank you so much for your support and for listening. Have a great day. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me. This is a more serious episode. I just wanted to really share some things that were on my heart. It's been, bugging me and trying to do the right thing. With this podcast, I really wanted to hear both sides of the argument, I actually got a little criticism from my Christian friends saying, hey, why are you having people of different faiths talking about what they believe? And I said, well, it's important to hear both sides, and then people can kind of make an informed decision and see it works for them. Maybe no religion works for them. Maybe they enjoy knitting. Maybe they'll say, hey, this Christianity thing kind of sounds interesting. Maybe I look more into this. Maybe being Muslim is the answer for me. So I think all of us have to find what our truth is. And I think the problem is, and this has been a struggle going back, and, one of the biggest criticisms of the church is that they were the judge and jury, and anyone who disagreed with them was put under their thumb. So we started having more freedom so that we can have freedom of religion to allow people to practice their religion in a way where they weren't infringing on the rights of others, and that they couldn't be suppressed or denied rights. And so I think we've come to a place where it's gotten very challenging. And so the question is, what is truth? For me, truth is going to be different than someone raised in a Muslim country, or someone who was raised in a racist area of the country, or someone who was raised in who was homosexual growing up. All those things, and you start realizing, we all have a different worldview, and our truth may be different. And so the very people who told us that there is no absolute truth, there's only relative truth, are now saying that we can only speak the truth. The problem is, how do we know what the truth is? The old saying is that half of what we learn in medical school is false, and our job is to figure out which half is false. And, I'm in the habit of keeping old medical books, and I look back and I look at what people believed. Some of it was really spot on, and a lot of it was incorrect. One of my favorite examples in this old textbook that's sitting on my counter right here is, when they were talking about malaria, and they figured out that people on the lower floors of the houses were getting malaria more than people that were in the upper floors. So, all these doctors and experts at the time said it has to be because the thick air is lower on the ground in those houses, and it's the thick air that's causing the problem. So they thought it was the fog. They thought it was all the things that came with being lower on the ground. But what it turned out is that malaria was spread by mosquitoes. They never put two and two together on that. And so they thought, basically the mosquitoes were staying more on the lower floor, and more people were getting malaria from that. It wasn't because of the fog, but they were making an observation, but their observation was incorrect. And then we had this guy, Semmelweis, who came along and said, hey, I think, there may be little things on your hands that are causing infections, because he noticed that after doctors did autopsies, the pregnant women that he was delivering, their babies would die. But the people who weren't doing autopsies, the babies weren't dying. And they had a higher survival rate among the midwives and the medical students rather than the expert doctors. He was put in an insane asylum because they thought he was crazy. And then ultimately the germ theory was proven. So, a lot of these people who took a stand, as a lot of people know, Professor Noakes, Gary Fettke took a stand for low carb. They were called fringe, crazy. They were going to kill people. Dr. Unwin being another one who took a lot of heat. And then they presented their data and their clinical experience. And now, years later, after going through trials and tribulations and really sacrificing their careers for what they believed, they were vindicated. Now the American Diabetes Association has low carb as one of their recommended guidelines, in their recommended guidelines for treating diabetes, because it works. And then now there's a new handbook that they're selling that allows physicians and medical practitioners to use low carb in their practices to help patients. So what was fringe a couple of years ago is now becoming standard of care. But it took people to stand up and say, look, the standard of care is incorrect. And here's why. We're having a high mortality rate. Throwing drugs at the problem is not going to fix the underlying root cause of the problem. We have to make some lifestyle changes, right? So you've heard a lot of people on this podcast talking about low carb and how their life changed. You've heard people talking about faith and talking about how they get through life, and people of all different faiths, of no faith. And so I think it's important to present both sides, because if we don't, we never know what the truth is. And in medicine, more than any career or path on the face of the earth, it was critical. When I was going through training, basically what would happen is there would be a grand rounds. There would be a case report of whatever, doing a C-section. What's the best way to do it? I do it this way, you do it that way. Let's discuss the risks and benefits of both ways. And then you change the standard of care that way. You have to present both sides of the data. So now we're treading on some dangerous ground in the name of an emergency. I just want to read to you. I'm a terrible reader, so I'll give it my best shot for everyone. But this is a letter I received on September 9th, 2021. I wasn't singled out. Every doctor got this that's board certified. So let me read that to you. Dear Dr. Lenzkes, the Federation of State Medical Boards, which supports its member state licensing boards, has recently issued a statement saying that providing misinformation about the COVID-19 vaccine contradicts physicians' ethical and professional responsibilities, and therefore may subject a physician's ethical professional responsibilities, and therefore may subject a physician to disciplinary actions, including suspension or revocation of their medical license. We at the medical boards, they name all the medical boards, Board of Pediatricians, ABIM, American Board of Internal Medicine, where I'm certified for now. I actually am dual certified because of this letter, actually. We all hold this position. We also want all physicians certified by our boards to know that such unethical and unprofessional conduct may prompt their restrictive board to take action that could put their certification at risk. Expertise matters, and board certified physicians have demonstrated that they have stayed current in their field. Spreading misinformation or falsehoods to the public during a time of public health emergency goes against everything our boards and our community of board certified physicians stand for. The evidence that we have safe, effective, and widely available vaccines against COVID-19 is overwhelming. We are particularly concerned about physicians who use their authority to denigrate vaccination at a time when vaccine continues to demonstrate excellent effectiveness against severe illness, hospitalization, and death. We all look to board certified physicians to provide outstanding care and guidance. Providing misinformation about a lethal disease is unethical, unprofessional, and dangerous. In times of medical emergency, the community of experts, physicians committed to science and evidence collectively shares a responsibility for giving the public the most accurate and timely health information available so they can make decisions that work best for themselves and their families. And this is signed by all the board of directors of the medical boards. So I think it's really important for us to really look and say, what is true? This was in September of 2021. How much evidence do we have? Me as a physician, I really wanted to know the right thing because ethically I'm held to a standard of discussing risks and benefits with my patients. My job is to say, here's the good part about it, here's the bad part about it. That's what we're called to do ethically. And we also believe in patient autonomy, where patients can make a decision for themselves, what's best for them and their families. These last couple of years have been very stressful for everyone involved. A lot of doctors, most doctors are part of a system, a big healthcare system where you toe the line, you cannot question. The problem is if we can't question, how do we change the standard of care? At the time this letter was written, Pfizer hadn't released their data. I had no data to look at. So all I could do is listen to everyone I could on the subject and try to get different points of view, because my ultimate responsibility is to my patient. And a lot of us feel that way. And we say, what is the right thing to do? And sometimes we just don't know the right thing. The evidence wasn't clear to all of us. And we all had anecdotal concerns. And for the first time in my career, I was removed from YouTube for spreading medical misinformation. What was that medical misinformation? I interviewed a physician about his experiences in clinic, and he told his experience as a hospice doctor. And that resulted in me being taken off the YouTube for 6 weeks. You can go and listen and judge for yourself. It was Dr. Adama. It was one of my mid episodes. And I was really stunned because I had some other people on that had strong views, including Ivor Cummins, because I want to hear what he has to say. I don't say that all of my guests have the truth, but they have their opinion, and I want to hear what their facts are and what they are basing their decisions on. Another what we would call it tip of the spear guy or controversial is Dr. Peter McCullough, who I had the honor of meeting and spending a few hours of talking one-on-one with a small group of people. And there's no doubt I trust his integrity. I knew about him for a year. We all did. He was one of the most decorated, most published authors. He's done tons of studies, and his integrity speaks for itself. However, he was called a fringe doctor when he questioned. So I think one of the things we have to do is say, gosh, he may be incorrect, but he's questioning. And I think we have to be able to ask questions. I think truth is so relative to our life experience and what we see. And so if I do see something in clinic, what's my responsibility? Do I say something? Do I say this is just an anecdote and ignore it, which a lot of us did? Do we think some people are just grandstanding and trying to get attention? My argument for that is most of these doctors were well connected, and they were very well respected. And then all of a sudden they became fringe very quickly because they had the gall to question, much like Semmelweis and much like Galileo and different people who had ideas that were not popular at the time. And I think we've gotten to a point where political correctness and trying to appear right or having the right hashtag or saying the right thing that's going to make people happy, it's such a draw for people. We care about how many followers we have. And I really had to come to the conclusions like, look, the people who want to think independently, the people who want to have critical reasoning are going to listen. The people who don't and that have already made up their mind aren't going to want to hear both sides. So I think it's critically important that we step back and we say, okay, if I'm going to make the definition of what truth is and what truth is not, I need to have some guidelines. I need to show what the data is. I need to show why are we closing down outdoor dining that affects a lot of my patients who own businesses. What was the data on that? What was the data on asymptomatic spread? The one thing I've always respected about Dr. McCullough is when he posts something, he'll link to the actual articles. He didn't say all the experts agree and not quote something. He has actual science to back up what he was saying, as did Professor Noakes, as did Dr. Fetke. So these are really critical. And I really just want people to think logically. And if your mind's already made up, then you don't really need to hear both sides. But could you imagine going to a court of law and they say, okay, we're only going to present the prosecution side. We're not going to talk about the defendant side because that might offend people. How are you going to make a decision on guilt or innocence of people? So I think we really have to look at the intent. And I think it's very important that we don't have all the information. I wish I knew the information. I don't know the absolute mortality rate because there's so many crazy numbers out there. I don't know about the actual efficacy because there's so many numbers we've heard quoted over and over and over. And so at what point do we hold people responsible for predicting, 300,000 times more deaths than actually happen? Are they held to account? Are there people that caused the panic and lockdowns? Where do we hold people to account, and what is the truth? And I think that is the point. Only time will tell the truth. We were told a lot of things by the media that turned out not to be true, and I don't need to specify each individual one, but a lot of things did not hold up to scrutiny, and a lot of things were never investigated. So I think it's very important that we understand that, and then ultimately that you trust your physician's judgment. I mean, ultimately it has to come to our judgment saying, look, here's the risk, here's the possible benefit, right? Or here's the possible risk. Because I had a lot of people frustrated with me when we first came out with the vaccination, and they were asking me, what are the long-term risks? I said, I don't know. I really do not know. I know here's the speculation, here's the possibilities. Could there be zero? Well, most things don't have zero risk. So is there a possibility of complications? Yes. Do I know them all? No. Was the data released? No. Was it studied in certain populations? No, it wasn't. So how can I give you a long-term prognosis on something that I just don't have the data for? But there were a lot of people who said it's safe long-term, don't worry, it's fine. And, I think one of the things about having gray hair and being around a while is you start realizing we were told a lot of things were fine and a lot of those things weren't fine. If you look back at how many drugs were approved by the FDA that were subsequently removed based on our experience and what we saw aftermarket, it's unbelievable, and it's incredible. And so, a lot of us are what we call slow adopters, where we wait and see, because I don't want my first patients to be the guinea pigs for any new medication that comes out. I said, let's wait and see. And if I'm hearing great things and everything's working, we'll give it a shot. Or if the patient says, hey, I understand we don't know a lot about this drug and we want to try it, I'm willing to do it, fine. Also, there's some patients that I take care of that they use their autonomy, and I say, here's what I recommend. I recommend this medication or this treatment plan. And they say, well, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to do that. So what do I do? Fire the patient? Or do I say, hey, here's my recommendation? And I'm in a unique situation here as direct primary care, because patients are paying directly to see me. And if they're not going to follow my advice, it would be a lot cheaper for them to go to the standard of care or go somewhere where they really don't care about your outcome. They'll just throw you another drug. But I think a lot of doctors now are really starting to reassess. I think when we received this letter, I think a lot of us clicked in our minds, said, uh-oh, like this is really difficult, because we also received another follow-up letter that says if we write an exemption letter for someone and the board deems it's inappropriate, then we lose our license again. So it's very difficult, because for me, again, assessing truth, how do I know if someone has firmly held religious beliefs? How do I know, prove that? How do I know that, they've had bad outcomes with other medications that this may also be a bad outcome? We don't know. And if it's extremely rare, if it's 1 in a billion chance that you could die from a treatment, should we let you know that? I think so. I think we need to let you know and not say, hey, just do it. It's fine. Everything's great. Because again, a lot of times we do not have all the data. And I think that's why they call it practicing medicine, because we're practicing sometimes. We're practicing on you sometimes because we don't know. We have to look at the long-term data. And sometimes we don't have that at our fingertips. And I think the dangerous thing is, what is truth? I think that's ultimately the question, is who determines truth, right? If the vegans take over, now the carnivores are the misinformation people. If the carnivores take over, now the vegans are the misinformation people, right? If the Muslims take over, now the Christians are misinformation. So it really comes down to who's in power and who determines what's information and misinformation. I think that's the dangerous slope we're on, because what we have to realize is right now, the misinformation may be on your side. You may be on the right side of the misinformation right now, but in a month or two, you may be on the wrong side of the misinformation. Then what do we do, right? And so when another group takes power and they decide that you are providing disinformation, now all of a sudden you're on the hot seat and your career is at risk. So I think it's really important that we realize, hey, let's hear both sides of the story. Let's have a public hearing and we'll talk and say, hey, Brian, you give your view, let the anti-low carb person give their view, and then we can discuss it. And if I can use my continuous glucose monitor and I can use my patient records and I can use patient success stories, I'll be all in for that. I would really like to do that. So I think it's really important that we don't know the long-term truth. I don't know the long-term of low carb necessarily. I know what physiologically should happen. But, I think we always have to have an open mind and be willing to change course when new information comes along. But however, if we disallow any misinformation or new information, then we never change the standard of care. The reason our medical care is so great is because someone came along and said, hey, we could do this better. How about if we try this different approach? People who've had a recent hip replacement, for instance, there's a new approach that works better than the old approach. Knee replacements, there's new approaches that works better. Now we're seeing people go through a little keyhole to do a bypass surgery or a valve replacement. And at the beginning of this, it was crazy because it took so long because no one had experience. There was worse outcomes at the beginning. So what do? Stop it? Or do you say, let's try to perfect this, let's keep going in this direction? Sometimes the old way works better, and we realize that, but it takes time to figure that out. I believe the average time for a new medicine or a new breakthrough to be adopted into the medical community is about 17 and a half years after the first, raised red flags or raised benefit. Cigarette smoking was a huge one. Look how long it took us to say, yeah, cigarette smoking's bad, right? It took us a long time to get that through. And a lot of people were damaged as we waited for all the evidence to come out. So it's a tough one because as a doctor, I think there's two, I was thinking about it, two times when overcorrection is a problem, right? If any of us who've driven on a slippery road or hit oil, if you overcorrect, that's when you're going to get into trouble. If you slowly correct and you try to navigate it a little better, you do much better in the long run. Also, from a medicine perspective, overcorrection can be a big issue. If everyone starts doing something without really knowing what the long-term ramifications are, then we get into big trouble. So some people say, let's just kind of wait and see. Let's make sure everything's safe. My responsibility is to the patient. And again, looking at risk and benefits of saying, does the benefit of this treatment outweigh the risk? And that's ultimately what we'll come to. And sometimes the benefit does outweigh the risk and the patient still says, I don't want to do it. And as a physician, what do I do? One of the biggest dilemmas we had in early training, and I had a patient who was Jehovah's Witness. And she said, I will not get transfusions under any circumstances. But she insists on taking huge doses of anti-inflammatories, which can cause ulcers. I say, you're putting yourself at major risk because you're the one person, if you bleed, we can't really save you because I can't give you a blood transfusion. So, again, looking at the risks and benefits, and trying to figure out what's best for you. And ultimately, I believe in patient autonomy. It's not popular right now because I believe if we mandate something, this is why it stood up strong against the mandates. Whether the vaccination worked or not, I'm not making a judgment on whether it's efficacious or not. But the point is, the person should have the right to say, I refuse any treatment, right? Or I want to get the treatment, or I have to look at the better of society, or I have to look at my family, or I have to look at keeping my job. Because a lot of people were put into a very poor condition where they were forced to get a medical treatment against their will in order to keep their livelihood, in order to provide for their family. And I think one of the big things about truth is we have to all determine our own truth, right? I mean, I can present data to you. And the reason I started this podcast was to say, look, here's my truth. I can't argue with it. Look, here's my testimony. And I know going through times we're going through, and now we have monkeypox on the horizon. Now we have new things on the horizon that we're going to be worried about. But for me, I had to put my faith in God and my faith in what I believe and say, okay, the good people are going to win in the end. There's going to be good outcomes. We're going to go through hard times. There's no doubt about that. But where is your foundation? I think that's one of the things of saying what is truth is having that new Rolex going to matter if you can't put gas in your car, or is having the bigger house to impress your neighbors going to be the right thing to do when you can't afford to use your air conditioner, you can't afford to take your family on vacation anymore. So I think these things of truth and what really matters, I think going through hard times are what's gonna help you figure out what really matters, right? What it is working more to have more financial security make sense at some point, or once your 401k goes away, then what? What's your backup plan? So I think a lot of us are starting to think that and think, what really matters, like helping your neighbors, does that really matter? I think so. I've given episodes on that. Does serving other people matter? Yeah. Does being kind to other people matter? Yes. Not treating people in a racist way or judging people based on their lifestyle choices, maybe. Does that matter? Yes, of course. And being kind and decent. So I think one of those things is we will all be judged, and people will ask me, so do you think this guy's going to heaven or hell? What do you think? I'm like, doesn't matter what I think. I don't make the rules, right? I'm not the rule. I'm not the judge and jury. I'm not the arbiter of truth. And I think a lot of us have to come to that conclusion, is that truth is relative in some ways. For me, biblical truth is truth. When I see it, I go, okay, that's true. It's because it's always worked out when I assess it against time and say, okay, why did I go down this path? Why did I start this podcast? Why did I lead my career path where I was financially secure? Because I realized it wasn't just about the money. It was about making an impact. And maybe something we say here speaks to you, and you say, well, maybe I'll look at things a little different. Maybe if my job is that terrible, I'll look for other alternatives. Or if my marriage is that bad, I have to look at trying to fix that. How do we rectify the situation? And sometimes it's not rectifiable, maybe, and people are unevenly yoked, or they don't have the same uh, uh, desires in life or the same values. And I think these are all things that we really have to come back to and say, what is truth? I know there's consequence to making bad actions and for making bad choices or hurting other people. Ultimately, there's consequences. You may not have it now, but there will ultimately be consequences in life. Maybe it's karma or whatever you want to believe in. But I think the golden rule, that's why I want people of different religions where I can say, hey, I like that. We all agree on certain topics, like the golden rule, like, be kind to others. Be a decent person, don't infringe on the rights of others, all those kind of things. Do we stick to it? No, we screw it up all the time. And that's why there's so much resentment in the church. And that's another thing about truth, is so many people have been hurt by the church, or Christians, or probably me going out and saying the wrong thing, or having a bad attitude. So, the truth is at some point relative, but there is truth in the world. There is good and there is evil. And there are people who want to stand up for you, whether you believe it or not. I think that's the important thing, is there's people fighting on your behalf that you'll probably never know. And you may be criticizing those same people right now. But some people have a view that's like, it's not a narrow view. They see the big picture and they step back and say, oh, there's problems that we have to fix. There's bad things coming. It's not about being negative or thinking everything's going to be terrible. But I think part of it is looking at reality and testing it against what what you've experienced, and then come up with your truth. So hopefully this rambling will help you to understand a couple things. I think really getting that letter was jarring to me. I remember sitting there thinking, wow, this is a crazy time, because this is a fundamental shift in medicine. To say, look, we're going to come take your license, your board certification, if you say something we don't like. And I've never in my career seen that. And that's why I was stunned. And I spoke up a little bit publicly about it, because if you become truth and you're wrong, then what? Once if you're wrong about what you're saying and you go after people, do they come back and do they have recourse against you down the road? Or are there other possibilities? And also, the big thing is there, what is truth? What is misinformation? We don't know what it is. There's no definition. So how do you know if you're speaking the truth or not? Because we all want to speak the truth. And the problem is, there's people on both sides who will exaggerate. They'll use propaganda to get you to sway to their view, but just tell the truth. Ultimately, I think that the truth as you know it, and say, hey, look, here's what I'm seeing. This is what I'm concerned about. And let's discuss it openly, and I think that is one thing as a society, we've fallen away from, is having a reasonable dialogue where we can discuss things and say, here's your view, here's my view. I'm Christian, you're Muslim. What do you believe? Why do you think I'm crazy? And in a respectful way, not saying you're wrong because you believe what you believe. And I think we're falling into that so much. I see it on Twitter all the time. Good friends of mine saying, you're wrong, you're an idiot, you don't know anything. Well, the guy's pretty smart and he's done a lot of good things. So it's really saying, hey, we disagree on this one topic, because the one truth I've learned in life is that I can always find a common ground at some point, at some level, whether it's we like the same football team, or we went to the same high school, or, we voted the same way, whatever it is, or we have the same faith. And I think we've done such a good job of dividing ourselves that we have fear of each other. And when you fear each other and you fear government and you fear police, then we're in a really, really dangerous situation, because fear makes us do crazy things, and it makes us do that overcorrection thing. It makes us overreact to things and not say, let's give the benefit of the doubt and let's sit back a little bit and assess things. So I think my advice is, and of course, this is not medical advice for anyone unless you're my patient, but really sit back and say, let me just assess a little bit, not overreact, not be panicked, not live in fear, but let me assess the situation and see what my best course of action is and what's best for me and my family. And I've had people make decisions on both sides of the fence. They go, look, here's my reasoning for doing it. I get it. Makes sense to me. Here's my reason for not doing it. Here's my list of concerns. Makes sense to me. So ultimately, I think there's going to be a little bit of a revival in medicine where we start saying, hey, what about patient autonomy? What about discussing risks and benefits? And I think there's going to be a lot of meetings and a lot of discussions about this in the future, because I think our ethics, as a matter of fact, one of the head of ethics got fired for his stance, and he was talking about natural immunity and things like that. And he basically got fired from his job. So we'll see what the truth is when this all comes out, when it all settles. But I think there's a lot of unknown. And I think a lot of us, most of us, are not intentionally trying to spread misinformation or cause, trouble, and especially in the medical field. I mean, I know doctors are rule followers. I'm a rule follower. When they said wear a mask and you have to go in this business, I respect that and say, okay, I don't want to cause problems. I'll do what I have to do. Looking at the data, and discussing it, and there comes a time when you kind of figure out, do I just blindly follow rules, or do I have a discussion with someone about, look, here's the risk, here's the benefit, here's what the protection level is. And I think really, honestly, of all the times in history, I've never ever lost faith in the medical journals and studies and the bias that happens and the funding and how medical students are being educated. I saw it for a while, but I never really realized the major impact of the loss of critical thinking. So what I'm hoping is the listeners here just say, let me just step back and say, is Brian pushing an agenda? Is someone pushing an agenda on me? Why do they have a vested interest in what they're saying? And I'll tell you just from my perspective, look, as a Christian, I don't get extra bonus point by someone said, hey, I believe in God because Brian helped me. Right? I don't get any more into heaven than I did before. I believe it's by grace, and I believe that has already been paid for. So, it's not like, that like I get a bonus point to convince you one way or another, but I think it could help you maybe. But maybe you say, hey, I'll look at a different faith and try it out for a while, or I'll try just, not thinking just about me and start thinking in the broader scheme of other people. And maybe that makes a difference for you. So I don't want to ramble too long here. I probably already have, but I just want to let you know, there's, have some grace for your doctors, and also they're under pressure. I know a lot of them, and I talk to them, and I will predict now there's going to be a massive retirement of doctors and doctors leaving the field, because it takes too much of a toll on our bodies and our brain and our souls sometimes to, not be able to speak what we see as the truth because it's not the accepted truth. So I just hope that, doctors kind of come around, they become advocates for their patients. And I'm shocked at how many doctors haven't really spoken up to say what they're seeing. Behind the scenes, I've had a lot of doctors tell me what they're seeing, and they say, I just can't talk about it because I'll get in trouble, I'll lose my license. And letters like this reinforce that fear. So it's a tough time for docs. So, when you go see your doctor, be nice and have some grace. They're up there trying to help people, and they're trying to do the best they can. And sometimes they just become a cog in the wheel, and it's a tough position to be in. I know, because I was there for 18 years and to some degree still there. I mean, we have to really be cautious of who we like on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. But I think, our clinical judgment ultimately is what draws patients. I've been very blessed to have new patients come in during the pandemic because they say, you're not going to judge me, you're going to listen to me, you're going to spend time with me, and you have my best interest at heart. And I think if you don't feel that way about your doctor, start looking, because it's going to be a tough road. I think we're going to have a big shortage of docs, and especially the ones who really have a lot of integrity. They're not going to be able to handle, their conscience will get to them, and they're not going to be able to handle some of the decisions they made, or some of the things they didn't say that they probably should have said, or some of their concerns. But, time will tell. And again, I don't know the truth, but I know that, it is definitely a point of discussion behind the scenes with doctors. And so, I think ultimately, try to give people grace, have your truth, but don't force your truth on other people. Don't be the one person that says, how many calories are in that? Or, if you do that, you're going to hell. I mean, fear is not going to be the motivator in this situation. It's going to be understanding and say, hey, I want to be heard and listened to. And the only people I've blocked on social media have been people who've been disrespectful, right, in a discussion, and just bring up the same arguments and, are nasty about things. But, if you can have a reasonable debate, that's what, then you'll know what you believe. When someone debates you on something, you'll say, oh, I don't know at that point. Let me look it up. Let me go figure it out. So I think open debate and discussion is critical, especially in medicine, but also in general life, is being able to discuss why do you have the view you have? Why do I have the view I have? And be able to do it in a respectful way. And hopefully this podcast, you'll see that where people can express their views and not be judged for what they believe. And then hopefully they learn from you, or you learn from them, and we kind of just be reasonable people, and not have big drama at the office, and kind of know that you all have each other's back. Because one of the big things I noticed is in 9/11, everyone was helping each other. No one said, what's your race? What's your sexual preference? What's your religion? Nothing like that. They said, hey, you're in the rubble. I want to help you, and I'm going to get you out. So that was one of the big things where I saw our country come together. And now I see us divided, because we said back then we'll never forget, and we did, And so I think understanding history, understanding your role in history, and just trying to do the right thing as you can. And sometimes you'll be wrong, and apologize when you're wrong and change course. So everyone, hey, thank you for listening. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and figure out what truth is for you. Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information, and hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.